Good afternoon and welcome to Whether or Not. Today we're going to be taking a look at water hyacinth. Now it is quite a big issue in a lot of African states and indeed a lot of states around the world where it infects the water bodies and it makes our water security really rather diminished indeed. So let's first of all take a look at what is water hyacinth. Well, as we all know, it's a floating plant. So as you can see over here, we have a example of a water hyacinth, and this is a small, rather small plant. You can see it has roots that hang into the water from which it draws its water and its nutrients, and they grow together, and in fact these roots tangle into something called rafts, and indeed these rafts can really be a very, very dense blanket over the water indeed. So the reason they float and how they float are air pockets, which are actually located in these bulbs. They're very small air pockets, very spongy type of a bulb there, and that causes these to float. And then, of course, when we see these coming together, their rubbery skin, their leaves touch on top, and then underneath their roots become entangled, and they become a very dense raft, as we said. Now, water hyacinth is a Category 1 invasive species here in South Africa, and it's prevalent all over the world. You can see just in Africa alone, we have all of southern and central Africa is prevalent. It is prevalent in all of southern and central Africa, but it also extends far north into parts of North Africa. Now, this, of course, would be along the Nile River Basin. We also see it in parts of Asia, Australia, and, of course, the Pacific Islands there, and indeed we see it in North America as well. But where does it really come from? Well, it's from South America, and we see it very, very prevalently indeed in the Amazon basin. So, of course, there we see a lot of vegetation, a lot of plant life. So the plant is very, very adept to surviving, and that is one of the reasons why we call it a pest species and an invasive pest species, and this is why it is restricted. So first of all, the plants do generate an extremely high number of seeds. So each plant will generate pods, which then break off into little seed pods. These seeds remain fertile for between 5 and 20 years, which means that even once these pods break off, and they're very small seeds, which are in fact smaller than a millimeter, when those break away, those can survive for 5 to 20 years without starting to grow, which makes it very, very hard indeed to get rid of. They quickly spread through an entire river system once the conditions are right for growth. So this is when we get things like algal blooms and very warm temperatures. Then we get a bloom of hyacinths as well. It threatens water security. Now, this is one of the main reasons that it is so important to know about water hyacinths and that it is such an invasive species, because the hyacinth creates a thick, dense blanket over our water systems. You can see here, this is an example of the Hartbeestpoort Dam looking from west to east, and we can see this dense, dense blanket of water hyacinths over this part of the dam. Because they float, they do move with the wind as well. It blocks sluice gates, it blocks hydroelectric power stations, and of course this makes it very, very problematic for not only our water security but our electrical security as well. And of course you can use chemicals to get rid of the chemistry in the water that it creates, because in fact it does toxify the water, but those detoxifying chemicals are extremely expensive. So another thing that it does, well, it gets rid of indigenous flora and fauna. It is so dominant in a biosphere there that it drastically reduces the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water. This will kill fish, and as you can see, we have some examples of this. Dead fish will be seen in the water, and that is one of the signs that you have an extreme problem with water hyacinths. Now, we can get rid of water hyacinths even temporarily, and one of the methods is a mechanical method where you use things like backhoes, and we just physically take the hyacinths out of the water. There are machines that are specifically built to get rid of hyacinths in the water, but all this does is temporarily remove specifically the plants that are growing at the moment. Now, you can also use a chemical method in which you spray chemicals onto the plants, and that kills them chemically, and that way they also can't germinate seeds, but we always will have the seeds. As we said, they generate in numbers. Now, this is an example of the Hartbeestpoort Dam bloom in September of 2017. And as we see that very same picture there, dense blankets of hyacinth blooms there. It's so dense, in fact, that it almost doesn't look like a water body at all. This is taken near the dam wall. And of course, as you look at that picture, you would swear that that would be a grassy field, wouldn't you? Well, yes, this is what a problem water hyacinths are, not only for us here in Africa, but around the world. And this is why we're talking about it. That's going to be the end of our Whether or Not for today. Stay with us here on the SABC.